So the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima is finally set to release, titled Ghost of Yotei. And fans of the previous game and just samurai alike are no doubt hungry for media of all forms to get their fix of sword-wielding action. And stories of samurai are constant in both classic and modern-day media, and they portray honorable warriors in situations where a blade is often the only way out. And luckily, there's a massive amount of must-see samurai cinema available to pass the time while waiting for the game's big release. Ghost of Yotei is centered around the way of the samurai and features a rare female samurai as its main character. Instead of the majestic island of Tsushima, this time it takes place in the wild expanse of the Hokkaido region of Japan. So with that said, here are some of the best samurai films to watch while waiting for Ghost of Yotei. So first on the list we have Golden Kamuy. So Golden Kamuy is a historical action adventure that's set during the early 20th century in Hokkaido, Japan. It follows a legendary Russo-Japanese War veteran and a young Ainu huntress on a dangerous quest to find a massive hoard of hidden Ainu gold. To locate the treasure, they must hunt down a series of escaped prisoners, each bearing a piece of a tattooed map, while competing against various factions that are also after the gold. So basically, Golden Kamuy was a Netflix movie that came out about a year ago, and it was a surprisingly good manga anime adapted live action movie. You know, there's not too many good live action adaptations, but I will say I did really enjoy this one. For one, it just had really good action, it had fun characters, it also had some pretty strange anime moments, but you know, it's just all fun, and it was a fun, entertaining movie. And I really just like its setting. You know, it's a dangerous, snowy environment in the Hokkaido region of Japan. So if you just want to see a good, you know, live action adaptation, definitely check this one out. And next we have Ichi. So Ichi is about a girl who's a blind beggar that wanders from town to town. And this type of charade just helps her remain undetected as she looks for her lost mentor. But secretly, Ichi is a deadly master swordsman that was taught by the legendary Zatoichi, the blind swordsman. And just eventually, Ichi's journey brings her into contact with a village that's under attack by a band of mercenaries. So I was recommended this one, I remember a few years ago, by just someone on my channel. And I'm glad I eventually did watch it because I am a fan of the Zatoichi series. And this is sort of a spin on that, but it is different enough. Because the main character in this is female, so she has to kind of interact with characters in a different way than, say, Zatoichi would. So this creates some pretty good tension and suspense. And next we have After the Flowers. So this is based on a Shuhei Fujisawa novel of the same name. And it follows the daughter of a clan official who has learned fencing skills from her father. She meets Magoshiro, who's a low-ranking samurai, who is also known as a highly skilled swordsman. The two of them meet on a fateful day underneath a fully bloomed cherry tree. She's already challenged and beaten all the other students in his dojo, but it happened on the day that he was not there. So they agree to meet for a match. The two expert sword students face off in their only meeting, which ultimately leads to a bloody upheaval in the clan as treachery of the worst kind must be destroyed. So I'm just a big fan of Shuhei Fujisawa's adaptations. I've even done entire videos on why they're so great. And this is just like all the others, just beautifully filmed. It's a relaxing period drama. You know, you could just sit back and watch it and relax. And just like with all of his stories, there's not much action, So when we finally get a sword fight, the impact is just so much greater. And I will say some of the fight choreography in this is very well done. And it makes me actually believe that this female swordsman can actually hold her own. So this is just another hidden gem, and I really recommend that more people watch more of Fujisawa's adaptations. You know, Twilight Samurai, Sword of Desperation, The Hidden Blade, you know, all of them are just awesome films. And next we have Sword of the Stranger. So Sword of the Stranger is set during the Sengoku period in Japan. A young thief named Kotaro and his faithful dog are made enemies of the state by the Ming Dynasty and are being chased by a gang of assassins. While on the run, Kotaro finds a skilled Ronin who helps him. And fearing for his life, the young boy offers to employ the samurai's services in exchange for safe passage to a safe place. And this ends up taking him and the samurai down a violent and dangerous path as the Ming Dynasty attempts to kill the boy at all costs. So as you can see, this is an animated samurai film, but it really is amongst my favorites, and it's just a true hidden gem. You know, no one ever talks about this, and it's great. And just visually, Sword of the Stranger is one of the most impressive animated films ever made. And it's really one of Masahiro Ando's long list of just exceptional works. And you know, there's just great swordplay, great music, great characters, a great villain. And I really just love the ultimate showdown at the end. It's so well made. So anyway, this is just a great film that I'm always happy to revisit and recommend to people. And also, it has a snowy and western type of environment, so that definitely fits in well with the theme of Ghost of Yotei. And next we have Blue Eye Samurai. During Japan's Edo period, a half-white, half-Japanese Onimusha named Mitsu seeks vengeance against 4 Western men, one of whom is her father, who illegally remained in Japan during the closing of its borders by the Tokugawa shogunate. So I remember when this first came on, it was just a really big hit, and I was kind of late to the show, so I didn't get to review it. But when I first watched it, I was just really surprised by it. It's a really engaging story, has good characters, and it's surprisingly bloody. You know, some really good bloody combat in this. And there's also a surprising amount of really graphic nudity and sex scenes, so it's definitely very adult. But still, it's just a no doubt really well made series. Tons of people love it. And, you know, I'm disappointed that we still haven't gotten to season 2. But just a plotline about revenge and, of course, the female lead in this definitely makes it compatible with Ghost of Yotei. And next we have Azumi. So Azumi is about a teenage assassin girl who must defeat 3 evil warlords while also battling her own heart. So to really sum up Azumi, I'm just gonna say that it's awesome. You know, if the concept of a teenage girl just taking on an army of samurai sounds interesting to you, then just go right ahead and watch it. It's definitely not realistic at all, but just go in expecting pure entertainment and fun. You know, when I play Ghost of Yotei, I'm just expecting to kill hordes of enemies as a girl, so it can't really be too much different from this movie. So definitely check it out if you just want over-the-top action and just pure fun. And next we have Unforgiven. An old swordsman played by Ken Watanabe, his former comrade, and a young braggart are hired by prostitutes to track down bandits who mutilated one of their women. So the original Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood is just amongst one of the greatest westerns ever made. It was a really powerful showing of how someone older like Clint Eastwood could still star in a western and just be an absolute badass. And even crazier is that this was over 30 years ago and he's still active in movies. So, you know, you gotta give the guy credit. But the Japanese Unforgiven remake that came out in 2013 continues that trend but with Ken Watanabe. And he's just an absolute star in Japan, and every time a Hollywood movie has a Japanese character, he is usually one of them who plays them. And Unforgiven 2013 is just an absolute hidden gem. Not many people know about the samurai remake of Unforgiven. And it's really just a shame because they're missing out. Because this is just such a well-made film. And when I watched this, I watched it back to back with the original. And this remake does play out very similar to that one. It's essentially the same premise, but it's entirely a different movie with a different feel because of the new setting. And the characters in this are different from the original. And it takes place sort of at the end of the samurai era. And it's filmed beautifully in the Hokkaido region. So what I'm hoping the most from Ghost of Yotei is that it makes me feel like I'm in this movie. That'll be the true test. And next we have Kill Bill. A former assassin, simply known as the Bride, wakes up from a coma 4 years after her jealous ex-lover, Bill, attempts to murder her on her wedding day. And so she sets out to get revenge on everyone involved in the loss of her unborn child, her entire wedding party, and 4 years of her life lost. So Kill Bill was just a massive hit in the West, and I just remember during that time period, it seemed like Asian cinema was just making a big impact on the West. There was kung fu stuff everywhere. And the movie performed very well, so it sort of proved that there is a market for martial arts films like it. It's also a reminder too that female movies can still make money too. That is, if they're actually good. And Kill Bill is just a great film. But it's really a love letter to just Asian cinema as a whole. You could just tell when you watch this that Quentin Tarantino loved Asian cinema and he was just putting all that love into this movie. And it has some great guests too, like Sonny Chiba. It's always great to see him. And it's been debated whether or not, Kill Bill counts as one movie or two. My favorite way to watch it was always with the Bloody Affair edition, which just combines both movies into just one massive, over 4 hours long epic. And I like it too because it shows the uncut version of the Crazy 88 fight. With the original film, they had to make it black and white just to get past censors. But when you watch it in color, it just feels like an entirely new fight. But the films too could work as two individual films. Volume 1 of Kill Bill is always more action oriented, and 2 was definitely more of a slow burn western. But anyway, these are just must-watch films, especially if you want to play Ghost of Yotei. And next we have Samurai Champloo. So Samurai Champloo follows the adventures of 3 friends. There's a tea waitress named Fu, a wild outlaw named Mugen, and a skilled ronin named Jean. And the story is actually really simple. Fu at one point saves both Mugen and Jean from execution, and then because of that, she kind of forces the pair to aid her on a quest to find a samurai who smells of sunflowers. So this is just a very personal show to me. And I kind of came across this during a time in my life when I was sort of getting back into anime just after years of taking a break from it. And I just remember how blown away I was by it. I sort of formed a habit of just watching it every night after work. And it was just a really easy and relaxing show just to put on. And I really would just get lost in the world. And normally I don't like episodic shows like this, but here it works because every episode, while just being a different story, still manages to have the characters develop. And you grow to like them too as just the show goes on. And it gets to the point where when you make it to the end of the series, you just don't want to let them go. And I just love too how it blends samurai films with lo-fi hip-hop, two of my favorite things, and somehow it works. And it definitely is silly at times, like it sounds. This show definitely is more comedic than being a drama, and I sort of noticed that the last time I revisited it. And you could just feel the soul of Nujabes, who did the music for this, and sadly he's not with us anymore. And I do swear that this was the invention of lo-fi music, something that would really not catch on until now. And what's actually interesting is that the creators of Ghost of Yotei worked with the director of Samurai Champloo, Shinichiro Watanabe, and he actually helped come up with a gameplay mode that plays relaxing lo-fi music, and a very similar sound to Nujabes. So I'm really just excited for this feature. I do love the Kurosawa mode, but I'm definitely gonna be switching to this, especially if I just want to relax after just a hard day of work. And next we have 13 Assassins. So 13 Assassins follows a ragtag group of samurai that are coming together on a suicide mission to stop an evil warlord. So Takashi Miike's 13 Assassins always gets mentioned on every top 10 of, best samurai films. And I will admit that I was a little turned off by it the first time I watched it, because it doesn't feel at all like a Kurosawa film. This isn't Seven Samurai. And that's sort of what I was used to at the time. But just getting past that and just seeing what this film is on its own is what really helped me appreciate it. And I do now believe it's one of the greatest action movies I've ever seen. And I like how majority of this film is pretty tame, but then when it gets to the end, it just explodes with all-out action that lasts over 40 minutes. It's insane. And it's just this awesome, well-choreographed battle, or more like a massacre. And you really have to see it to believe it. Miike went all out with this. I always felt like he was just holding back the whole movie until he couldn't take it anymore, and then he just unleashed everything on us. And I've since become a really big fan of Takashi Miike, so now I sort of know what his films are all about. But I will say that this is probably his most accessible movie to just most audiences, because some of his stuff could be very risky. So if you're a fan of samurai films, this really is a must. Just be prepared for a ton of bloody combat scenes. But what's also great with Ghost of Yotei, how we have the Kurosawa mode and now the Watanabe mode? Now there's the Miike mode. And they actually worked with Miike to create this visual that brings the action up close and adds more blood and mud. And it gives that same sort of carnage that we see in 13 Assassins. So I'm definitely going to have a lot of fun with this mode for sure. I almost wish that it would automatically go on whenever there's action. And it's going to be really fun to just experiment with all three of these visuals. Kurosawa gives the old school samurai look, Watanabe is relaxing, and Miike is just pure carnage. And next we have Lady Snowblood. Lady Snowblood stars Mayako Kaiji as Yuki Kashima. She is an orphaned young girl who was born in a woman's prison. Her mother died right after giving birth to her. But right before she died, she told her daughter to get revenge on everyone. Yuki is then trained to become the ultimate weapon and claim vengeance for her family in the bloody path of retribution. So Lady Snowblood is definitely just a must-watch, especially for anyone, once again, interested in playing Ghost of Yotei. That was the first thing I thought when I first heard about the game. And Lady Snowblood is just such a classic take on the revenge genre. And there's really nothing else like martial arts movies from the 70s. They were kind of their own genre, and they really feel like they take place in their own universe. With their own set of logic and physics. But really, these snowy visuals of Lady Snowblood are just so iconic and surreal. It also has a real 70s grittiness look, and I just love the superhuman sword fights with the really bright red geysers of blood. It's just pure fun. And when you watch it, you could tell just right away that this inspired tons of other movies, especially Kill Bill. And finally we have Yojimbo. Yojimbo follows a nameless Ronin, or samurai with no master, played by Toshiro Mifune. He enters a small village in feudal Japan where these two rival gangs are struggling for the control of the local gambling trade. And so the nameless Ronin pits each gang against one another, posing as a bodyguard. So Yojimbo is just a massive movie in the samurai genre. You're always gonna hear it mentioned. And of course it's no surprise because it's directed by the legendary Akira Kurosawa. And every samurai movie he's made is just a 10 out of 10. If you want to see a good samurai film, just watch one by him. But apparently the developers themselves for Ghost of Yotei named Yojimbo as their main inspiration. And if you remember with Ghost of Tsushima, they had this Kurosawa mode that basically let you play the game with this sort of vintage black and white filter. It made the game visuals look like you were playing an old, samurai flick. And it was a nice little shout out to, the classic films. But Yojimbo is pretty interesting because it's really a Western film. The setting itself, even though it's Japan, it still looks like something from the American West. We could actually call it a noodle Western. But the most iconic thing about Yojimbo is definitely its protagonist, Sanjuro. He's a character type that we would continue to see for generations of film. And I'm kind of wondering if the main character in Ghost of Yotei will just be as crafty as Sanjuro was. He was a great fighter, but he was a real master at pitting his enemies against one another. It would be cool if he could use some kind of manipulation technique. Yojimbo is just such an iconic film. It's really been the inspiration for almost every action movie, especially ones with lone wanderers. So if you've never seen Yojimbo, just do yourself a favor and just watch it right now, along with all of Kurosawa's other samurai films.
Counter! Are you really hurt?
So those are what I believe to be the best movies to watch before playing Ghost of Yotei. And it's kind of nice because I remember the first time when I sort of started YouTube, one of my first hit videos was a list of movies to watch before playing Ghost of Tsushima. So hopefully this game ends up being good. Right now I am sort of on the fence. But with the new added Watanabe and Miike filters, I'm definitely getting more excited. Hopefully they took inspiration from those two things. Anyway, if you like this video, then please subscribe, hit the thumbs up, the notifications. And if you want to support my channel and help it continue, I have a Patreon. And I also have a free Discord where we discuss movies and topics like this. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. The links are all in the description.